Good evening. Good evening, members of our council and executive board, to our vice president, Maurice Buckley. I saw Maurice there a minute ago, he's disappeared on me. To all past presidents here, to our Director General, Caroline Spillane, staff at Clyde Road, you're all very welcome, friends and guests. We have apologies from a couple of people, and maybe you know some others amongst yourselves, but we have apologies from Liam Connellan and from Kieran Feehan, immediate past president. So, my name is Peter Quinn. I'm a chartered engineer and the president of Engineers Ireland. I'm delighted to welcome you all here this evening to the offices here at Clyde Road, where we're inaugurating together with all of you our Chartered Engineer Commemoration Year. Also tonight, we will launch the new publication entitled Called to Serve 2. Its author is the renowned engineer and historian Dr. Ronald Cox. Ronald is a Fellow of Engineers Ireland, Chairman of our Heritage Society, and former Dean of Engineering at Trinity College Dublin. I'm your MC for this evening, and we have a number of presentations that will follow, and then at the end we'll have a reception in Café Clyde. Your presence here tonight is welcomed and much appreciated, and just at the very beginning I have to draw your attention to the risk of mobile phones. So if you have a mobile phone, perhaps switch it off or put it on silent, and to observe the fire exits that I know you're probably all familiar with them, the door you came through and the one over here to my left. So 2019 promises to be an exciting year for Engineers Ireland, as this is the year we mark the establishment of our Chartered Engineering title 50 years ago. Beyond the specific statutory functions reserved for chartered engineers, which include critically important certifier roles in relation to building standards and also fire regulation certificates, and for the construction of nursing homes and child care facilities, achieving this registered professional title is a public statement of an engineer's competence to practice as a professional. It is a seal of approval by an engineer's peers that they have developed an ability beyond that achieved during their academic years to that of a professional practitioner. It's also the mark of an engineer's commitment to the continuing development of their expertise and ethical practice. So why is all this important? It's important because regardless of whether an engineer is writing code, developing a medical device, designing a wind farm turbine interconnector, or teaching the next generation of engineers, as a chartered engineer, they are reassuring the public of their respect and consideration for society, its safety and its security. The public no longer desire this reassurance, they demand it. Achieving the registered professional title of Chartered Engineer is therefore an important goal in any engineer's career. I know there are many chartered engineers amongst us this evening, but I'm particularly delighted that Aoife Murphy is in the audience. Aoife was the winner in November of our Chartered Engineer of the Year Excellence Awards in 2018. It was the passing of an Act of Oireachtas in 1969 that provided for the establishment of this registered professional title, which is, of course, internationally recognised. Within the Republic of Ireland, Engineers Ireland is the sole authority to award this title. Chartered engineers are highly sought after, particularly by medium and large engineering businesses. In our Engineering 2018 Barometer report, our survey of engineering employers indicated that there was a strong demand for graduate engineers and also chartered engineers who typically have 5 to 6 years plus experience. And it's proven difficult for employers to find appropriately skilled people. I look forward to hearing an update on the Barometer 2019, which will be published during Engineers Week in March. To ensure our members' qualifications are recognised around the world, Engineers Ireland engages with similar organisations overseas and also standards bodies, both nationally and internationally. I'm delighted to say that Engineers Ireland is one of the first organisations to sign an agreement with its counterpart in the UK to ensure the ongoing recognition of qualifications between the jurisdictions. This deal will allow ongoing mobility post-Brexit for engineers coming to the Republic and for Irish engineers going to the UK. We announced this on the 11th of December. Damien, here sitting beside me, will talk more about this in a moment. But as a profession, we wanted certainty, and we want to continue to support trade and support the development of critical infrastructure and economic development, regardless of the outcome of Brexit. It is vital that we maintain the mutual recognition of our engineering professionals between Ireland and the UK, particularly if the UK operates outside of the EU directives. In addition to the establishment of the title of Chartered Engineer, this important act of Oireachtas in 1969 also provided for the merger of two engineering bodies, Cumann and nInnealtóirí, the Engineers Association, and the Institution of Civil Engineers of Ireland, ICEI, into one more wide-ranging organisation to represent the engineering profession in Ireland. This organisation was then titled the Institution of Engineers of Ireland, or Cumann and nInnealtóirí, now of course trading as Engineers Ireland. So, 2019 promises to be an exciting and historic year for us. It marks both the 50th anniversary of the prestigious Chartered Engineer title, and it also marks the unification of the engineering profession. We will be ensuring that our commemoration year is referenced and highlighted in all of our 2019 corporate activity. We have our annual ball coming on the 18th of January, Engineers Week in March, the new 4 regional fora throughout the year across the country, at the AGM in May, and at the presidential address by the incoming President Marguerite Sayers, and also at the Excellence Awards in 2019, and which that same event will of course have its own fantastic Chartered Engineer of the Year category. I would like at this point of the evening to thank the Chartered Engineer Commemoration Committee members. And again, Ron Cox is on that committee with Mort Coleman, Orla Lonigan and Finbar Callanan. And I thank them for their dedicated work, and they're here with us tonight, and I want to say it publicly, thank you very much for that work. In the audience also, there are members of the staff here at Clyde Road with us, and I want to thank them for their work, particularly Anne-Marie Clark for her work in organising this event here tonight, and all our organisation's corporate events. I want to also mention Donald Hanlon here in Clyde Road for working with the committee to ensure the 50th Chartered Engineer Commemoration Year icon was designed and in place for 2019. And Donald also designed our 2019 membership card to include the 50th icon and to provide a lasting reference point for members. I'm also particularly pleased tonight that we will formally launch Call to Serve 2, and it's the follow-up to Call to Serve 2014. This is a significant new historical publication, which is a wide-ranging and thorough study by Dr. Ronald Cox of each address made by the Presidents of Engineers Ireland from the time of unification or bringing together of the profession of the profession in Ireland in 1969, right up to the present day of 2018. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I hope what I've said sets the context for a wonderful gathering here tonight. We will have a number of speeches here this evening. And firstly, as we are marking the 50th anniversary this year of our Chartered Engineer title, I would like you to welcome Damien Owens, Chartered Engineer and Registrar of Engineers Ireland. Damien's going to speak and give us his overview about the importance of being a Chartered Engineer. So please give a loud round of applause for Damien.
Thank you, Peter. For the next few minutes or so, I just want to give an overview of what it means to be a chartered engineer, where the concept came from, and where it sits, I think, in the global context, because engineering is indeed a global profession. So I want to start off with a definition. And the definition of a professional engineer recognised by the Council of Engineers Ireland for the title Chartered Engineer is the definition adopted in 1960 by the Conference of Engineering Societies of Western Europe and the United States. And it goes, a chartered engineer is competent by virtue of his or her fundamental education and training to apply the scientific method and outlook to the analysis and solution of engineering problems. He or she is able to assume personal responsibility for the development and application of engineering science and knowledge, notably in research, design, construction, manufacturing, superintending, managing, and in the education of the engineer. His or her work is predominantly intellectual and varied, and not of a routine mental or physical character. It requires the exercise of original thought and judgment, and the ability to supervise the technical and administrative work of others. His or her education will have been such as to make him or her capable of closely and continuously following progress in his or her branch of engineering science by consulting newly published works on a worldwide basis, assimilating such information and applying it independently. He or she is thus placed in a position to make contributions to the development of engineering science or its applications. His or her education and training will have been such that he or she will have acquired a broad and general appreciation of the engineering sciences, as well as a thorough insight into the special features of her own branch. In due time, he or she will be able to give authoritative technical advice and to assume responsibility for the direction of important tasks in his or her branch. So you can see that it's a very holistic, a very wide-ranging definition of an engineer, of a chartered engineer. So where did this really emanate from? Well, much of the early work in the definition of the profession, of course, was instigated in the area of civil engineering in the UK. In their publication, An Engine for Change, a chronicle of the Engineering Council in 2004, early definitions of a civil engineer can be found. And in 1818, the definition was, an engineer is a mediator between the philosopher and the working mechanic. And like the interpreter between two foreigners, must understand the language of both. The philosopher searches into nature and discovers her laws, and promulgates the principle and adapts them to her circumstances. The working mechanic, governed by the superintendence of the engineer, brings his ideas into reality, hence the absolute necessity of possessing both practical and theoretical knowledge. So then when the time came to apply for the charter, it was down to a Thomas Threadgold to propose some suitable wording. And I think these are the well-known definition of a civil engineer as the art of directing the great sources of power in nature for the use and convenience of man. And this was then embodied in the charter in the UK at that time. And later in the Times newspaper, the objects of the institution were published. And it was for the general advancement of mechanical science, and more particularly for the promoting and acquisition of the species of knowledge which constitutes the profession of a civil engineer, being the art of directing the great sources of power in nature for the use and convenience of man, as the means of production of traffic in states, both for external and internal trade, as applied to construction of roads, bridges, aqueducts, canals, river navigation, and the docks, for internal intercourse and exchange, and the construction of ports, harbours, moles, breakwaters, and lighthouses, and in the art of navigation by artificial power for the purposes of commerce, and in the construction and adaptation of machinery in the drainage of cities and towns. So that is of its time, but I think it's very interesting in that it encompasses the whole of society, and it would be very interesting if the Irish Times would publish a similar description today, either in hard copy or online. So if we look then to the formation of a chartered engineer, it consists around the world of two phases. The first phase consists of studying and successfully completing an engineering degree programme, accredited by Engineers Ireland in this case, and as meeting the education standard required for chartered engineer. And you probably know that since 1982, Engineers Ireland has accredited over 300 engineering programmes in 21 higher education institutes, including higher certificates, bachelor and master degrees. And the advent now of professional apprenticeships will be the next challenge in this area and will reflect a new and important sector in engineering education. The second phase is called the initial professional development phase and involves the achievement of the competences necessary to apply engineering principles to the solution of engineering problems. This phase is described in details in the Engineers Ireland publication Chartered Engineer Regulations for the title of Chartered Engineer. But if we look at the phases in a little more detail, as I said, phase one is an educational base. Now, I tried to get a figure in this, but there's approximately about 10,000 engineering colleges and universities around the world. But a little known secret is that they all pretty much use the same books, the same physical labs and software tools. Bernoulli, Euler, Laplace are the same in pretty much every degree program. So really, what is it then that sets a chartered engineer apart from the overall engineering population? And why is the title so prized and respected? And really, the answer is in the phase two of the formation process, the professional development phase. And it's here where we demand that the graduate engineer demonstrate the acquisition and development of a set of competencies relative to the workplace. The level of development of these competencies is assessed by engineering peers, so it's done within the profession. Much more than that, however, is a commitment to a code of ethics and all that entails, the recognition of the adherence to societal and broader environmental aspects of an engineer's work. It is notable that the public place high trust in the engineering profession, and this was demonstrated in the survey of the Engineering Ireland report in 2018, where we were placed second only after the medical profession in terms of how the public ranks our competence and the level of trust they place in engineers. It's also evident in the number of ethics cases that we process in Engineers Ireland. It's remarkably low by comparison to other professions. And I think that's a reflection on the level to which engineers, adhere and take their work seriously. In a seminal piece of work titled The Making of an Expert Engineer by the Australian engineer James Trevelyan, he highlights many of the challenges in the making of an expert engineer and identifies many disconnects and misconceptions between an engineering student's perception of what an engineer actually does and those of the engineer in practice. And I suppose this reflects the perception in many industrialized economies. There seems to be an industrial economy issue. And he highlights, I think, 64 perspectives and quite a number of misconceptions. So I just picked out misconception number 8, as he calls it. And the misconception, he states, is that students and novice engineers often think that good grades at university make you a better engineer. A high average grade demonstrates a better work ethic. In reality, however, workplace performance is unrelated to course grades because practice requires so many other skills and abilities that are not taught at university. The ability to learn these and other capabilities determine success. For example, building collaborative relationships with more experienced engineers, suppliers, and site supervisors. Also, course grades depend on many factors other than academic ability and motivation. So this was research done probably about 8 years ago at this stage. And follow-up studies then showed, well, what does an engineer actually do? And if you try and explain to somebody what an engineer actually does, it's remarkably difficult. So what does an engineer actually do? So follow-up studies found that 60% of an engineer's time is spent interacting with other people. 2/3 of that 60%, so 40% of the time, is spent on direct intervention and interaction. And in response to one comment that engineering is more than problem solving, one of the engineers in the study commented, "It's much more than that, because most of the problems are of a human nature than a technical nature." Nowadays, almost all engineering programs in Ireland have assessed work placement in the penultimate year of study, and this helps contextualise the final academic year for students. And just as an aside, the author of that book, James Trevelyan, we think today of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, connectivity, imaging as something quite new. From 1977 to 1989, so a 12-year period, he led a research team in Australia that developed the first sheep shearing robot. And I think it is worth, if you have time, to go and look this up. Look up the images of it initially, but the amount of technical challenges in that project, I think will explain for itself why it took 12 years to bring it to fruition. He's undertaken great research since in other areas, but I think his achievements demonstrate the competence of a real engineer very well. So we moved then to the use of the Chartered Engineer title. The widespread use of the Chartered Engineer title really it emanated in the UK, but didn't really occur until the establishment of the Council of Engineering Institutions in the 1960s, the mid-1960s in the UK. And today in the UK, there's about 177,000 registered Chartered Engineers, so that's a fair achievement. The title and concept of Chartered Engineers exist in other countries, Australia, Hong Kong, South Africa, New Zealand. And the Netherlands has recently introduced the Chartered Engineer process identical to ourselves in the UK, with guidance from the Engineering Council in the UK. Other countries are also considering the introduction of Chartered Engineer process. Every year, volunteer members from Engineers Ireland assist in assessing standards and assisting in the development of capacity of peer organisations around the globe, including in the last 18 months, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, Australia, South Africa, and the Americas, and across Europe. Despite our relatively small size, the contribution of our engineers to the work of the International Engineering Alliance is the second highest among its 30+ members. So that's something we can be rightly proud of. Though other countries have varying titles for their equivalent of Chartered Engineer, such as Professional Engineer, the hallmark of professionalism remains an assessment of competence and adherence to a code of conduct. Continuing professional development is seen as a necessary ingredient to keep engineers current in their knowledge, and is now mandatory in many jurisdictions. In New Zealand, they've gone a step further and have introduced a review process every 5 to 6 years where the engineer undertakes a reassessment process. So essentially, you have to reapply for Chartered Engineer every 5 to 6 years. And when you reapply, an advertisement is placed in the newspaper or online to say, a bit like the wedding, does anybody know of any legitimate reason why this engineer should not, should not be granted their license, speak now or hold your peace. So it invites the public or any of your dissatisfied or satisfied customers to make comments. As a consequence of the proliferation of professional engineer or Chartered Engineer standard, educational accords such as the Washington Accord and mobility agreements have been developed to foster mutual recognition between international professional engineering organisations. Engineers Ireland has been a founding member and signatory member of these accords over the years, and one was even signed in this building in May 2002, namely the Dublin Accord. The looming advent of Brexit has heightened the need to maintain certainty of recognition and mobility between engineers in Ireland and the UK. And you can see from when I spoke earlier, the whole evolution of the engineering profession in both jurisdictions is so closely aligned. As our President said earlier, Engineers Ireland has put in place an Access Pathways Agreement to allow for the recognition of holders of professional engineering titles between our Engineers Ireland and 35 UK professional engineering organisations. We're the first profession who have done so, and this was requested really by our members as a result of the Brexit referendum. As a result of a survey we took of our members as soon as the Brexit referendum was known. So our members, straight after the referendum, recognised we need to ensure mobility. Many government departments have been keen to support the emulation of our initiative by other professional bodies. In Ireland, some tasks reserved for Chartered Engineers are reserved for Chartered Engineers, and there were notable progress in the Building Control Amendment Regulations, BCAR, whereas science certifiers include chartered engineers. And I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but about 3 years ago, thanks to the work of Paul Sheridan, who worked here, a chartered engineer, he managed to get her name as one of the witnesses for passport application forms. So it will save you a trip down to the police station. You can just get a chartered engineer to witness your form. And briefly then, finally looking at our numbers. The growth in the numbers of chartered engineers over the last 50 years has been impressive. It's somewhat ironic, given the engineers' desire for exactness, that a report from the council from the period October 1969 to May 71 included the following statement. It is still difficult to state with entire accuracy the precise members of the institution. Considerable confusion has been caused by the bank strike last year, and subscriptions for 1970 are still coming in. This is late 71. The best figure is about 2,400, broken down as follows. Fellows, 290. Honorary Fellows, 6. Chartered Engineers, 1,907. Ordinary members, 236. Students, 33. And Associates, 2. 50 years on, we've increased that membership tenfold. And today we have, I suppose, 25,700 members. And 8,600 of those members are chartered engineers. So that is a great achievement in a relatively short time. So I think that after 50 years, we can certainly use the Irish phrase, "Too smart, not na hibre." We've come a long way. So thank you for listening and for your contribution to the engineering profession.
Thank you very much, Damien, for that. And not just for that, but for all the work you do on our behalf throughout the year. And it's indicative of all the work that's been done by the team here at Clyde Road. Thank you very much. So now we've come to the formal launch of Call to Serve 2, which has been generously supported by ESB. And I'm delighted that the ESB is represented here this evening by Pat O'Doherty, its Chief Executive, by Brendan Delaney, ESB Archive and Heritage Manager, and by Magilla Henshun, Networks Asset Programme Owner, ESB. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. I have a couple of minutes you want to take a seat. Are you all right? So, based extensively on original sources, Call to Serve 2 is an important publication for engineers in Ireland and a wonderful addition to Dr. Cox's invaluable canon of work. This is a substantial document that we are launching tonight. It's both wide-ranging and insightful. The publication runs to 200 pages and it's in 3 sections. Abstracts from the presidential addresses are preceded by a continuation of a brief history of the organisation from 1969 until 2018, in order to provide a framework within which the addresses may be considered. A major portion of the book is devoted to biographical sketches of each of the presidents. As president, I look forward to reading about the dedicated professionalism of those who have gone before us, such as former President Michael Lim, who died in 1972. Michael was the Deputy Chief Engineer at the Office of Public Works, who dedicated much time, circa post-unification as President in 1971, to ensure our bylaws and structures were in place. And of course, the talented Jock Harbison, who was the first President of the Institution of Engineers of Ireland in 1969. Jock, with others, ably steered reunification and worked so diligently in the foundation years. All strong, compassionate people whose leadership should be remembered. And it's wonderful that they are in this new publication, which so expertly is put together by Dr. Ronald Cox. The decisions made at the time of unification have shaped the path of our direction and our relationships with organisations around us. They raised the bar for what we could accomplish. I'd encourage you all to read this publication, and we are indebted to Dr. Ronald for the work he has done. I have the honour and pleasure of launching the book publicly tonight. I thank Ronald Cox for the time and care he has put into the project, for his dedication in documenting the thoughts, concerns, reflections and ideas of each of our presidents during the period from 1969 up until the present day. And before I introduce Dr. Cox to the stage, I want to provide you with some biographical detail. Ronald is an engineer and historian and a visiting research fellow in the Department of Civil, Structural and Environmental Engineering at Trinity College Dublin. He was formerly a senior lecturer in civil engineering and one-time Dean of Engineering at Trinity College Dublin. He's a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, a Fellow of Engineers Ireland, a Fellow of the Irish Academy of Engineering, and a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers. His recent books include Ireland's Bridges in 2003, Engineering Ireland in 2006, Ireland's Civil Engineering Heritage in 2013, and Call to Serve in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium Dr. Ronald Cox.
Thank you, Peter, for those kind words. It's always a little bit of a problem being the third speaker of three because the other two speakers have said everything I was going to say. But nevertheless, so consequently I will be fairly brief. But I just want to say a few words about the publication, not only of the present volume, but also just referring back to the first volume. The necessity of obtaining a charter had been felt since the foundations of the Institution of Civil Engineers of Ireland in 1835, but it wasn't until 1877 that Queen Victoria granted a charter as such to the institution, and this marked a new phase in the growth of the institution. The then President Robert Manning was named in the charter together with a number of other engineers who, quote, have formed themselves into a society for promoting the acquisition of that species of knowledge which appertains to the professions of civil and mechanical engineers and for the advancement of engineering and mechanical science. The passing of the Institution of Civil Engineers of Ireland Charter Amendment Act on the 12th of May 1969 provided for the formation of a new body to represent the engineering profession in Ireland, namely the Institution of Engineers of Ireland, or in the Irish Cumann nInnealtóirí. As well as widening the range of activities, the Act embraced most areas of specialisation in engineering and provided an umbrella and platform for the exploitation and development of these various specialisms, and combined the aims on and objectives of both the Cumann, that's the Engineers Association, and the Institution of Civil Engineers of Ireland. And that, of course, as has been said, resulted in the unification of the engineering profession in Ireland, which is one of the things we're celebrating this year. Sorry. The Act also, and of course most importantly, authorised the use of the title Chartered Engineer, and Damien has given us a good idea of the importance of that decision. And the Act actually said that this should be confined to a category of engineers who satisfied the Council of their professional competence and experience, or alternatively, who were authorised so to describe themselves by a professional body recognised by the Council, for example, the Institution of Civils in London. In his presidential address during the Charter's centenary year, which was celebrated in 1977, Peter O'Keefe, the president at the time, considered that the Charter Amendment Act of 1969 was one of the outstanding achievements in the advancement of the engineering profession in Ireland. It had truly unified the profession, whilst allowing for the specialised areas of engineering and technology to be fully recognised. O'Keefe stressed that unity had been hard won, and that it must be protected vigorously, because it was not alone essential for the profession, but also of vital importance in the advancement of engineering in Ireland. As the President mentioned, Jock Harbison was one of the main driving forces behind the aim of amending the Charter, and it was entirely fitting that he should become the first President of the new body in November 1969. He had formerly been a council member and President of the Engineers Association, and he's regarded as having made really the greatest contribution of all to the unification of the Irish engineering profession. The picture there, which is reproduced in the book, is of the chairman of the Provisional Council, which was made up of members of the two councils, of the two bodies, Professor James Doug, Jim handing over the chain of office to Jock Harbison. At the first meeting of the council of the institution, at the RDS, you'll notice, and at that time the institution was more or less homeless, hoping to, as is said in the book, hoping to build a new engineering centre somewhere in Dublin, and that fell through. But to cut a long story short, eventually they were given a home here in Clyde Road by the Engineers Association, and the rest, as I say, is history. The book being launched this evening, Call to Serve 2, really continues on from where Call to Serve was published in 2014 and has been extended to 2018, published to mark the 50th anniversary of the introduction of the title Chartered Engineer and the unification of the engineering profession in Ireland. As we know, past presidents of the institution, of which I'm delighted to see many here today, have interpreted their role in a variety of ways, including chairing meetings of the council and executive, presiding at the presentation of technical papers, and representing the institution and the engineering profession, both nationally and internationally. The tradition of presenting a presidential address during the term of office of each president was begun in 1856 by George Willoughby Hemans, and since that time, with few exceptions, each president has addressed the membership in their own individual style, often drawing on the experiences gained during their respective careers. So in the book, edited abstracts from the presidential addresses are presented in a historical context. The full length of the illustrated addresses varied from around 1,500 words to over 10,000. So the task of providing an appropriate synopsis of the content of each address without detracting from the overall message being conveyed by each president proved somewhat challenging. The full presidential addresses are available in various formats, the earlier ones in the Transactions of the Institution of Civil Engineers of Ireland and later the Institution of Engineers of Ireland. More recently in the annual reports, in digital format and often archived online. it's hoped that the abstracts presented in the publication will serve to whet the reader's appetite for a more detailed study of the contents of individual addresses. The synopses of the presidential addresses are preceded by a continuation of the brief history of the Institution of Engineers of Ireland from unification with the Engineers Association up to the end of 2018. Consists of extracts from a similar history compiled by Finbar Callanan, who is with us this evening, and published previously in 2006 under the title Engineering Ireland, to which has been added a review of the more recent activities of the institution, now operating as Engineers Ireland. And the concluding section of the book comprises short biographies of each of the presidents from 1969 to 2018. The title of the first volume was meant to be only a working title, but it seemed to achieve some permanence as the project proceeded. I suppose one could say I was just too lazy to change it, but at some stage I remember Googling call to serve and was somewhat concerned to find that all the leading websites offered religious themes, for example, hymns sung by the Call to Serve Mormon Choir. Nevertheless, I decided to stick with the titles as they seemingly best describe the vital role that our past presidents have played in representing the engineering profession and supporting the further development of the institution. Incidentally, both volumes are now available online on both the institution website, I'm told, and also on the, or will be also on the Academy website. In fact, I didn't realize that was the case until the other day when I was just checking to see what call to serve on the website now showed up. But I put in call to serve engineers, and immediately I got through to volume 1, which was the first version of the book on the Academy website. So it's all there for the world to see, and hopefully I've done some service in preserving the history of the institution and its leading characters, put it that way, over a period of time. There are copies of the first volume upstairs if you wish to stagger away with that, and the second volume. Although the members of the engineering profession are generally concerned with solving present-day problems and planning new developments, the recording and understanding of our engineering heritage has time and again proved invaluable when considering solutions to many of the engineering problems which have been inherited from the past. The activities of the institution's Heritage Society during the past 20 or so years have reflected a growing desire to become better acquainted with our engineering heritage and the achievements of past generations. It's therefore essential, in my view, that the professional organisations such as Engineering Ireland and its sister organisation, the Irish Academy of Engineering, adopt appropriate procedures to ensure that important records are archived in order that sources relating to the development and achievements of the organisations are not lost. In fact, at this stage, I would mention some documents that have been left for viewing outside, kindly provided by Donald Blair, and a lot of the material came from his father Cumann, who was very active in the Engineers Association and later the institution. And one particular one I looked at was restructuring of the local authorities, the Donovan report, not for publication, it says. So maybe that's the only copy that there is available. But I would hope, with Donald's permission, that a lot of this material would end up in the engineering archive, which is handled or looked after very capably by the archivists in the Irish Architectural Archive, which is housed 45 million square, and indeed is open in a normal office hours. The library is open for any member to go in and seek information. And one of the things I did only yesterday was looking up information about a graduate in 1905, I think he was, who applied for associate membership of the institution here in 1920. And there was his membership record, and I got all the information about his earlier career, where he went to school, his date of birth, and so on. Now, sad to say, that sort of information is not necessarily kept anymore, but certainly it made life quite easy for me for volume 1, call it that, when I was preparing the information on the presidents. Of course, data protection acts nowadays don't allow that, but we have to live with that. So, in conclusion, I'd like to just thank our current president, Peter Quinn, for his kind words, and also to Damien Owens, Registrar, for his work in promoting the professional title of Chartered Engineer. My thanks also go to the School of Engineering in Trinity College for affording me the opportunity to continue in my, quote, retirement, unquote, as a visiting research fellow in the Department of Civil, Structural and Environmental Engineering, and for providing the facilities which are needed to undertake the research and subsequent publication of both volumes of Call to Serve. Finally, I wish to add my thanks to the Electricity Supply Board for kindly sponsoring the publication of both volumes, which contain the biographies and presidential addresses of a number of distinguished engineers who have contributed significantly to the achievements of the ESB over many years. So I will now pass you back to Peter to conclude the formal proceedings, and hope to meet many of you upstairs in the Cafe Klein. Thank you all for coming. Much, much appreciated.
Well, thanks very much to Dr. Cox for this evening's presentation, and not just for that, but for all the work you've done in making these documents available to us all. And it's that amount of work that we'll always be grateful to you for, and we really appreciate all the work you've done. So a copy of the new publication, and indeed some of the previous ones that were mentioned earlier, 2014, they're available tonight upstairs in the cafe, and they're free of charge to all of you. And having said that, if you wish to, you can make a donation to the Benevolent Fund as you take your copy, but it's entirely up to yourself. So you're all invited for tea or coffee or whatever you want reception in Cafe Clyde, and thank you very much for coming here this afternoon. Thank you.